Welcome to the History Junk Shop, where overlooked facts turn out to be treasures. I'm Eugene Finnerman, writer, lecturer, and I hope a decent baritone. That introduction actually was a heroic feat of self-restraint. I wanted through me hours and call myself Ewan. As you can see from my x-ray, I have an advanced case of schizophrenia. Yes, it might be contagious. You'll know in about 30 minutes. So, what are my symptoms? I crave oatmeal. I'm trying to ferment my lawn. That's the basic recipe for scotch, you know. As you can see, I'm having trouble pronouncing my R's in less than 3 syllables. Of course, I'm imagining myself in a kilt, and I'm thinking of dyeing my leg hair red. Yes, mine is an extreme case, but you might have it too. Our image of Scotland is certainly contagious. The rugged, fierce beauty of the land and the people. According to television, this is the average Highlander. If all Scots actually looked that way, the population would be about 600 million. In fact, the rugged, fierce land leaves the Scots looking like this. Well, you might think that's a scene from Macbeth, but actually those are 4 teenagers in Glasgow. Not quite so glamorous. So, what is the cause of our familiarity and fondness for this hard Scrabble culture? If schizophrenia had a petri dish, it might be this man, Bonnie Prince Charlie, the Scottish endearment for the drunken imbecile who led the Highlanders to disaster, ruin, and Canada. He was the heir and last champion of the House of Stuart, or, in his case, the Souse of Stupor. His grandfather was the obnoxious and stupid James II, King of Great Britain. Why was James II so unpopular? Perhaps it was a family tradition. The Stuarts, the rulers of Scotland, always had a poor working relationship with England. James IV was killed in battle with the English. His son, James V, died in flight after a lost battle with the English. His granddaughter, Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed by the English. Ironically, when Elizabeth I died and had no heirs, one of the side effects of being a virgin queen, the throne went to her distant cousin, James VI. Somehow, this James avoided being killed by the English. However, his son didn't. Charles I. Charles I had 2 sons who managed to avoid infant mortality, 17th century medicine, and Oliver Cromwell. Charles II was remarkably charming and bright for a Stuart. Actually, he took after his French grandfather, Henri IV, Henry IV of France. The merry monarch had 14 children, but none were with his wife. Upon his death, and not by a jealous husband, but by 17th century medicine, they treated his minor stroke by bleeding him to death. The throne went to his legitimate heir, his brother James. Alas, James was a typical Stuart, stupid and arrogant. Worse, he was an irksome individual. He could have offended you discussing the weather. However, being likable is not a requirement of a king. Otherwise, Britain would have had a 216-year gap in monarchs, from Charles II until Edward VII. James's personality could be overlooked, but not his religion. While in France, a refugee from Oliver Cromwell, this Stuart prince had picked up Catholicism instead of syphilis. Parliament was none too thrilled with the prospect of a Catholic on the throne, but it had the solace that James would be a theological aberration. From his first and reassuringly Protestant marriage, James had 2 daughters raised in the best traditions of the Church of England. From his second and alarmingly Catholic marriage, James had no children. So, no matter how irritatingly Catholic he was, his daughters, Mary and Anne, were dogmatically correct. Furthermore, both women had been paired off with impeccably Protestant husbands. Mary was the wife of William, the sovereign of the Netherlands. Anne married a nice Danish prince. There was, however, one threat to this Protestant succession. Apparently, James's wife did not find him all that repellent. In 1687, Mary of Modena, nice Italian girl, became pregnant. The baby's gender was a matter of the greatest concern to Parliament. The arrival of a daughter would be uneventful. The little Catholic princess would trail after her older Protestant sisters in the royal succession. However, according to primogeniture, a son would take precedence over his older sisters, and Parliament was faced with the prospect of a dynasty of Catholics. Well, guess what happened in 1688? The announcements in the London Times would have read, "Mary and James Stuart are pleased to announce the birth of their son, Junior. Parliament has an opening for a senior executive position in the British Civil Service. Protestants only." The Glorious Revolution began with the birth of a son and heir for James II. Under most circumstances, the arrival of James Jr. would seem a joyous event. However, the members of Parliament were not checking the baby gift registry at Harrods. No, they would have been in the stationery department, selecting a tasteful invitation to William and Mary to come over from the Netherlands and replace James II on the throne. Of course, Parliament did have its prerogatives. If it could behead a king, it could also fire one. So long as her husband William was acknowledged as a sovereign in his own right, Mary was willing to overthrow her father and rule in his place. With the support of Parliament, William and Mary arrived from the Netherlands to claim the throne. Although James II still had the loyalty of most of the army, the king's nerves failed him and he fled with his Catholic family. Perhaps he actually liked living in exile in France. And William and Mary had a pleasant and quick voyage from the Netherlands. The winds on the North Sea tend to blow in a southwestern direction. It is accommodating for a trip from Holland to England. In fact, the wits of the time referred to that weather pattern as a Protestant wind. Since childhood, you've known all the details of the Glorious Revolution, as well as the weather patterns of the North Sea. Perhaps you just didn't realize it. But this summary will sound familiar. Rock-a-bye baby on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall. And down will come baby, cradle and all. Surprise! what you thought was just a lullaby happens to be a dissertation on English history. Now, William and Mary had no children. Perhaps his fondness for pugs should have been a hint. After their deaths, Queen Anne succeeded. The Stuarts usually were stupid but attractive. Imagine a dynasty cast by Aaron Spelling. Anne, however, was begrudged the good looks and cheated in every other way, too. The dull, miserable woman outlived her children, was exploited by politicians, and betrayed by every friend but her brandy. When she died of alcohol and dropsy, Parliament had to choose her successor. Her half-brother James, growing up in France, was the nearest heir, and he did have supporters in England. The Tory party was founded by Stuart partisans. Indeed, Parliament would have agreed to his succession if he converted to Protestantism. Being a Stuart, of course, he refused. His attitude was, let the public convert. But Parliament had an alternative. A second cousin to the Stuarts, George of Hanover, was an elderly, repulsive German prince who couldn't speak English. However, he was a Protestant. With the Whig party in control of Parliament, Britain soon had King George I. Now, a slight diversion here. Let's talk about the politics of the time. In the political genesis of the late 17th century, there were two parties evolving. One party was a gang of curmudgeons who hated Catholics, distrusted kings, and liked business. They were known by their opponents as the Whigs, a Scottish term for bumpkin. The other party was a pack of squires who loved themselves, revered hunting, hangovers, and the monarchy, and considered religion merely a matter of etiquette. They were known by their rivals as the Tories, a Scottish term for robber. For some reason, both factions accepted these libels as their formal names. Now, the rejected prince attempted a coup in Scotland, but being a Stuart, he managed to do everything wrong. He landed a year late in the winter, caught a miserable cold, and then fled back to France. This was known as the First Jacobite Rebellion. Jacobus is the Latin form of James, and was how his partisans identified themselves. If you're wondering, the Latin word for Stuart is administrator. That definitely does not sound like a rallying cry for a rebellion. Yay, let's go, administrators! No, not quite. In time, the son of this prince, Bunny Prince Charlie, would incite the second Jacobite rebellion. Charlie's chief advisor was his brandy flask. Drambuie still advertises his enthusiastic patronage. Attempting to restore the Stuarts to the British throne, Charles landed in northern Scotland in 1745 and incited the Highlanders to rebellion. In some ways, the Jacobite Rebellion of 1745-46 seems like one of those recent British comedies that requires subtitles to understand. We could call this saga the full Monty Bank. A drunken, aristocratic twit trying to pose as just a working fella runs for president. No, that's the reincarnation. Anyway, this besotted fop rallies the Highland rowdies who, despite their inept leader, managed to conquer Scotland and invade England. The British are caught completely unaware. London is in a panic. Charlie's army of Highlanders is only 100 miles away. The rebellion actually has a chance of succeeding. The Tory party in in England is sympathetic. Then, in an untimely moment of sobriety, Charlie gets cold feet and retreats back to Scotland. Unfortunately, the end is no comedy. The British Army has a chance to organize and begins a vengeful pursuit. At the last battle, Culloden, in 1746, the Scots are back where they started, in the Highlands. They have swords and an idiot commander. The English have cannons, muskets, and a sadistic commander. Actually, Culloden is a massacre rather than a battle. The Scottish casualties number in the thousands, the British in the hundreds. Charlie manages to escape and gets to France. The remnants of his army are subject to British mercy. Hundreds of prisoners are executed. Thousands sent as slave laborers to the British colonies. The English begin a period of brutal repression in the Highlands. Their basic policy gave the Scots three choices. Would you like to hang, starve, or go to Canada? However, Bunny Prince Charlie was not reduced to drinking Molson's. He managed to escape to France and spent his remaining 42 years plotting against his liver. On January 31st, 1788, he finally succeeded. Yet, to the Scots, the Bonnie Prince is fantasized as a romantic hero. He and his Highlanders are the subjects of ballads and laments. In the 18th century, songs served as news, editorials, and opinion polls. Yes, even my singing is pedantic. My Highland medley is a musical history of the Jacobite rebellion, from its early, exuberant triumphs to its moldering, embarrassing nostalgia. In 1745, Prince Charles Stuart landed in Scotland to reclaim the British throne for his ousted dynasty. Who we net fit for Charlie reflects the Highlanders' enthusiasm for the young pretender, as he was called. Who would not fit for Charlie, who would not draw his sword, who would not up and rally at the royal prince's word. Ironically, the Bonnie Prince could not have mastered the lyrics himself. With his French accent, his version would have been une fille for Charlie. Lacks something, doesn't it? However, his opponent, George II, was just as unintelligible, having a thick German accent. The war was not a contest of grammar, but the rival songs of the rebellion would indicate the war's outcome. The English were marching to the British Grenadiers. Some talk of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander and such great names as these. A good tune in itself and an indication of an ample supply of gunpowder. The Scots were massacred, and the Bonnie Prince wandered the Highlands disguised as a woman before finally escaping to France. So, the next song in my Highland medley is a dirge. The English were not gracious winners. Their hangmen were fully employed. The crown attempted to eradicate the Highland culture. Bagpipes were outlawed. The Scottish language was outlawed. Even the spelling of "Huinet fit for Charlie" would have gotten you 6 months in prison. However, the Scots did not blame the prince who led them to disaster. On the contrary, they were hoping for his return. Bonnie Charlie is now away, safely o'er the friendly main. Mony a heart will break in twain, should he no come back again. Come on, join me with the chorus. Will ye no come back again? Will ye no come back again? A better love ye cannot be. Will ye no come back again? There are dozens of such songs as that. I mean, ye take the high road and I'll take the low road. That's about 2 Scottish prisoners. One's going to be hanged. So in a way, he's going to get back to Scotland in spirit faster than the other. Some of the Jacobite laments have migrated into the American songbook. My bonny lies over the ocean, my bonny lies over the sea, my bonny lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my bonny to me. Did you think the song was about Bonnie Parker? No, it's about the Bonnie Prince. But, 2 centuries later, we just think it's about some attractive, no doubt red-haired girl who's away from us. Nope, it was about an exiled Scottish prince. Luckily for the Scots, their incompetent prince preferred to drink himself to death. He left no legitimate children, 1 or 2 of the other kind, and his sibling was a Catholic cardinal who actually did practice celibacy. So, there would be no Stuart heirs for the Jacobite cause. The Bonnie Prince died in 1788, but a Jacobite resistance continued, even if it amounted only to pointless mayhem. In 1792, an exasperated Robert Burns told his fellow Scots to grow up and get over it. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear, ye Jacobites by name, give an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim. Your doctrines I mun blame, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I mun blame, you shall hear. Burns denounces them in rhyme, the heroic strife and assassin's knife, and concludes, just get over it. Learn to lead a normal life. Forget about your Stuart princes. Then leave your schemes alone. In the state, then leave your schemes alone in the state. Then leave your schemes alone, adore the rising sun, and leave a man undone to his fate, to his fate. Then leave a man undone to his fate. Was Burns a traitor to Scotland? No. He was just an exhausted realist, pleading an end to the futility. He wasn't an Anglophile by any stretch of the imagination. Indeed, instead of a Scottish Stuart monarchy, he rather liked the idea of a republic, noticing the idea from America and that we're now at the very time happening in France. The British were aware of Robert Burns' Republican sentiments, and if he actually hadn't died of an infected tooth, he might well have ended up the poet laureate of Australia. Well, British dentistry saved him that. But in any case, he was telling the Scots to move on. His song fittingly ends this history and my Jacobite bandstand. Now, are you feeling any more Scottish? I want to thank These illustrations are the delightful work of my friend and collaborator, Nadine Eastwood. Now, if you have any questions, feel free, or comments, requests, lavish praise, of course, you may contact me at eugene@finnermanworks.com. I welcome them. Look forward to it. And I thank you for your company, and I'll see you in a month. Thank you. Till then.